Welcome back to Ray's Talk Show. This is your host, Ray Collazo. We talk about the things you're talking about with the people you want to hear. Thank you so much for joining us. And, we, as my mother and the women in my life, the strong Puerto Rican women in my life always like to remind me men need to listen more, and I need to listen more. So the audience has really called for us to bring on our experts and friends around the country to talk about this election from the Latino perspective. And who better than two friends of mine, great friends and also great leaders in our community, calling in from Washington, D.C., Charlie Ramos, and a dear friend of ours who's right in the middle, literally and figuratively in the eye of the storm, Marcos Villar. Charlie and Marcos, welcome to Ray's Talk Show.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Ray.
Marcos, before we get into the La Política, we're going to talk about the VP debate and, of course, the infamous saying now that is the buzz of social media, that Mexican thing, and what that means. Obviously pick these gentlemen's brains expertise about the election. Specifically, Marcos is really one of our leading activists in the state of Florida and what's happening down there with the Latino Puerto Rican electorate. And we'll get into the bochinche, and who knows we'll get into. But before we get into the politics, Marcos, you're in Florida, and all of our thoughts and prayers are with all of our family and friends down in the Sunshine State. So, how are you doing, bro? I hope you're safe, and I hope all of our friends and family have taken cover, bro.
Yeah. It's a big storm, and I think a lot of people are concerned and they're taking care. We boarded our windows up this afternoon, so hopefully that'll do the job, keep the water out and the wind. So, we're as ready as we can be.
Yeah, so we're obviously our thoughts and prayers are with everybody. We're literally taping this Thursday evening, right when the storm is really starting to hit Florida and the southeast part of our country very hard. And of course, lo sentimos mucho for our Caribbean brothers and sisters that have already dealt with the brunt of this storm in Haiti and many of the other islands. So, that's top of mind for all of us. But getting back to the politics, again, you're listening to Ray's Talk Show, where we talk to the people you want to hear from about the things you're talking about, whether it's politics, personal development, transitioning your skills and talents into online business, or just developing your online brand, showing your stuff. And look out for those regular episodes of Ray's Talk Show on the feed, but we're doing these special weekly political shows leading up to the election. Charlie, I want to start with you. We just had the VP debate a few days ago. And, of course, there was the infamous saying, that Mexican thing we're going to talk about. But I just wanted to get your initial impressions of the debate a few days ago between vice presidential candidates Tim Kaine and Mike Pence.
I think, personally, Tim Kaine steamrolled both Mike Pence and Elaine Quijano. Early on, I first thought they spiked his coffee like he drunk some cortadito de Miami because he was really... really aggressive, but I think as the debate moved forward, he definitely became more confident as the debate progressed. In comparison to the first debate with Hillary and Trump, Lester Holt seemed like he was asleep many times, and he really wasn't moving the debate along. I think Elaine, even though this was her first time, I understand, I think she tried, but it's hard trying to control the discussion. I think she was struggling with that. And the one thing I do know that I saw, it seems like Pence was avoiding the questions and he didn't want to talk about Trump, even offering a different opinion about the whole Russia assessment. So that was an interesting moment. And of course, right, that Mexican thing where they caught him off guard and he just kind of said it. He had that moment. So that's kind of my initial analysis of the debate. But I think Tim Kaine definitely fortified and definitely was highlighting Clinton's strengths, and Pence was kind of avoiding Trump or even his behavior. He kept avoiding the questions.
It's interesting when I watch the analysis, sort of post game, which I enjoy watching. I ain't going to front on it, but it always hits me that how the punditry is looking at something, is focusing on different things than we are. Because as activists and people that actually talk to real people every day, and God forbid talk to Latino citizens that have real concerns, we're focusing on the substance. And oftentimes, the biggest thing was the style thing. Tim Kaine butted in too much. Mike Pence kept his cool. and not really focusing on the fact that first of all, this actually, because they weren't as personality driven, they actually were able to talk a little bit more about issues and debate substance. But since Pence doesn't really agree with Trump and really is sort of trying to avoid this alignment with him, he really just, with the exception of insulting Latinos at the end, really didn't say much. So, Marcos, is that what you find when you're talking to people out in the community, that maybe for some people the debates are entertaining because Trump's a personality and the bochinche of it and the battling, but we're not getting what we want to hear. We're not talking immigration. We're not talking Puerto Rico. What do people get out of these debates in reality, do you think?
I don't know. I can't talk for everybody, but I can tell you that this has been the most baffling election in my lifetime. I never thought Trump would make it past the first 2 or 3 primaries, and he kept it up and kept it up, and now after the conventions, really, he did have a period of time where he bumped, but he's been pretty much declined since the debate, day by day, getting further down in the polls, and there's nothing that he can say or do that really is changing that. And what I see there is I think that really you have an electorate that is not happy with either candidate, is not happy with the establishment, is looking for alternatives. Trump was the alternative for this growing reaction to the diversity I think that the country's headed towards in this sort of backlash against a new demographic that we have in the country, in a new moment in our country's history. And he's represented being able to tap into that, but that's as far as it goes. And then the other people in the middle, I think, are just entertained by it all because there's nothing else you can do. And so at this point where we're getting closer and closer to the election, I think folks actually, are saying, okay, this has been fun, it's been entertaining, it's been, frustrating for those people who can't believe that Trump is actually on the stage this long. But people are starting to say it's about time to make the decision, and it was entertaining while it lasts, but we got a country to run. We're running a country here, right? It's not like a lot of people have said, it's not a talk show. It's not one of those reality show. Yeah, it's not a reality show. So that's how I view it, and I think this is how we see this steady upsurge, slow but steady upsurge that Hillary's having in the last.
I want to talk in a minute about that surge, and particularly what you're seeing, Marcos, being on the ground in Florida, and you can't talk to too many activists in this country that really know what's going on the ground in Florida with the Latino electorate, and in particular the rising Puerto Rican political culture and just electorate that's developing in Florida. So we'll get to that in a second, but I did want to ask you, Marcos, part of the reasoning and the justification for picking Tim Kaine over a diverse candidate pool and, maybe potentially a person of color or a woman was this argument that, because of his quote unquote connection with the Latino community, he speaks Spanish, he spent some time in Latin America, he's a devout Catholic, that would somehow, endear him and be an asset campaigning for Hillary Clinton in the Latino community, and specifically a community like Florida because of his background living in Latin America, and the announcement was actually done in Miami. Have you found that that's been any factor, Marcos? I mean, do you think that there's any Latino voters that are paying attention to that, either on Spanish media or maybe the Central American electorate that we have down there? That do you think that's helping Hillary at all with the Latino vote, Tim Kaine?
I don't think Tim Kaine adds or subtracts from Hillary. I think that this campaign is clearly and solidly about Hillary Clinton, and it's about Donald Trump. It's about the direction that the country is going to take. I lived in Virginia 10 years before I moved to Florida, and I happened to campaign for Tim Kaine when he first ran for governor, and I've known him, met him. He's a great guy, and I honestly think that Hillary could not pick there's very few people maybe that he could have picked that would have been better candidates for vice president. He's a really decent guy. He's a really decent guy. His heart's in the right place. He believes in what he's doing, you know. So I really think he was a great choice. I don't think it really makes a difference one way or the other in terms of what we're seeing in the
It was
polls
sort of
and who's going to
ironic
win the race.
when he was chosen that him being bilingual and was highlighted as such an asset when if that was important, why don't Latinos get credit for being bilingual? It was sort of ironic that the white guy gets like the brownie points because he could speak, God forbid he speaks another language. Charlie, I wanted to ask you that the highlight or the low light of the vice presidential debate was this comment. So for people that didn't see it, to give it in context, Tim Kaine spent a lot of the time basically calling out Trump on and trying to get Pence to comment or defend some of Trump's crazier policies, including build the wall and his anti-Latino stance against Judge Curiel and obviously his comments against Mexican immigrants. And, toward the end of the debate, when he brought it up for the third or fourth time, Governor Pence, vice presidential candidate Pence, says the infamous, "Senator, you've whipped out that Mexican thing again." And to Mr. Kaine's, Governor Kaine's reply, "Well, can you defend it?" So, Charlie, first of all, I mean, again, we're watching something different and hearing something different than the media because, quite honestly, if he had said something similar about another community, this would be the story the whole week. And outside of the Latino social media space and Spanish language media, it hasn't been covered that much. Talk to me about this comment, bro. I mean, am I being sensitive? I think it was one of the most horrific things I've heard in any sort of presidential discussion.
Yeah, it's interesting because you could tell that Pence was getting flustered because he kept asking him the questions over and over, all the questions about everything that Donald Trump has done, and he kept trying to avoid the question. And then when he just kind of blurted it out, it just caught fire. Like immediately, some gentleman, and I think it was in Portland, Oregon, he created a website, a URL that was redirected to Hillary
Latino
Clinton.
Danilo Alfaro. He bought that MexicanThing.com. Yeah,
that was like brilliant. Like I remember going on that. I said, "Oh, it's going to Hillary Clinton's website." And then I know that Voto Latino apparently created a similar link with .org that's going to their website as well. So I thought personally those two gentlemen, that was like the smartest and brightest thing they did, like thinking on their feet. Unfortunately, I think for Latinos, many times when things happen in our community, we're afterthought, even when they make comments about us. The same could be said about the Black Lives Matter movement. Hispanic young men are being killed just as much, but it doesn't get covered in mainstream media. It always happens that it's our Latino media that's covering it. Social media, us that we're in the know, we know what's happening, but it doesn't get highlighted in the mainstream media. And I think for too long, and it continues to happen, most of the discussions around politics, it's a very black and white conversation.
Charlie, I'll take that to another level. I think Latino activists are more in tune and focus more on the Black Lives, and this is a positive thing, are in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, more so than Latino when police brutality impacts the Latino community. I mean, that's how insidious this we're so used to not getting paid attention to that oftentimes we don't pay attention to ourselves, if that makes sense. Because you're absolutely right, especially in the West Coast, in Cali, these young boys, I mean, there's all kind of stuff happening, whether it's immigrants or, guys that are, that live in rough neighborhoods. So there's just, there's a lot of suspicion running around. And let's keep it real. Some of it's brown on brown cop, Latino kid, so, I mean, we have to stay really diligent on that. And I'm glad you brought it up. What else do you think about the after effects? Do you think this comment, guys, that Mexican thing is gonna make it even harder for Trump's ticket to get Latino votes?
I think he's already struggling, and I think this just adds more ammunition to the Clinton campaign, showing that he does not care about community. Earlier today they showed the Central Park Five, right? One of the young men that was exonerated on that crime in New York. who also said that Trump was running ads in the paper about him, has never apologized to them, and continues to think they should have been held accountable. So he just has this attitude about, it's like my way or the highway. And I think Latinos, they see that. Even though there's some Latinos that I struggle with, like my Latino Republican friends, there's a handful of them that still feel like, hey, I got to, support the candidate. But I am seeing a lot of Republican Latinos, mostly Cuban, who are saying they will support Hillary Clinton. So,
yeah, there's definitely a basta ya, sort of attitude happening here with a lot of Republican Latinos that I know. A lot of friends of mine that are Republican are going to vote for Hillary, or are going to stay and not vote at all. But to your question of the comment and why wasn't it covered by mainstream media, I think that when it is mainly we aren't really a subject of discussion in much. We've been singled out to almost one single issue, which is immigration. It doesn't necessarily fit us that well, but it's such a perfect issue for us in this fight, as Latinos, that people sort of like, it's become our issue. It's become our defining issue. But if you look at it, why isn't it being discussed? And I would think that we need to make a challenge, because and we need to be the ones making the discussion, obviously, and we are. But it doesn't break through to mainstream media. And I think that when you look at, for example, a lot of the even Democratic and progressive circles, it's hard to break through as a Latino in those circles as well. It's really difficult to break through in those circles. If you got the slightest bit of an accent, for example, usually it's the ones that don't have any accent at all that get to sit around the table. So this is I think a problem that's not just a Republican problem. I think it's a social problem, and it has to deal with the place of Latinos and how people feel about the place of Latinos in the society. We're still, I don't think we have become part of the fabric, the full fabric of the society as others have. And it's up to us to change that. And I think this election with Donald Trump has done a lot to galvanize us and to really what's happening in Puerto Rico, for example, with the fiscal board, and what's happening in Florida with Democrats running white candidates against Puerto Rican candidates in a Puerto Rican stronghold like Orlando. Those are wake up calls, and it's about respect, and I think that later on when we talk about the poll, we're going to see that a lot of the reaction, I think that Latinos and Puerto Ricans are having to the election right now is it's a moment for respect for us, and that's sort of the reaction that I get when I hear this dismissive comment from Pence, and then no reaction by the people that are supposed to be on our side, the Democrats.
Listening to Marcos Villar and Charlie Ramos, two of the top Latino political strategists in the country, no doubt about it. And again, listening to Ray's talk show, our political coverage leading up to the 2016 election, El Camino a la Casa Blanca. And our audience really wanted to hear some real down brothers and sisters like Charlie and Marcos talk La Politica, so they've been very gracious to bring us on, and especially in Marcos's case, dealing with this hurricane down in Florida. So again, our thoughts and love with all of our familia down there. In terms of, let's get into this. Marcos, you brought something to the table today, which I think is very important, which I think you just alluded to a little bit, but that you've got some exciting research that's just been released that you wanted to share with our Ray's Talk Show listeners, specifically about the Puerto Rican electorate in Florida, which is apparently, the pundits that don't even know much about our community know how important this vote is for this election and the future of our country.
Well, Ray, you've worked in Florida yourself and have a lot of experience here, and we've for years been talking about the growth in the Puerto Rican community in the state of Florida. and talked about what a potential that is and what a unique position it is for us because in Puerto Rico we don't have much influence on what happens in the United States, being a colony down there. In New York and Illinois, we've done great. We've done fantastic in Philadelphia and many other cities. We've done great at the local government and at the statewide government, been able to make huge strides because of the numbers and the smarts of a lot of the folks that we have coming out of our neighborhoods. In but in all of those places, very and in the north, very democratic areas. So we're never really, when it comes to national politics, never really in a position to make a difference. And so we've been looking at our community in Florida, in a state that is a swing state, has always been a swing state, has been the prize that every politician looks for when it comes to winning a presidential race. And here we are for the first time, reaching 1 million Puerto Ricans in the state. And wow, what a moment. For 4 years, we've been talking about how, we need to pay attention to the Puerto Rican vote and do trainings and get people involved and teach them how to run campaigns and how to get involved and how to register voters. All of the stuff we've been doing for years with, around the immigrant community and Latinos in general. But, looking at the power of Puerto Ricans, remember, we can vote. The moment we get a license in the state of Florida, we're eligible to vote. So wow, what a difference this year from previous years. We have for the first time a campaign, Que Vote Mi Gente, that is focused exclusively and specifically on the Puerto Rican community. And it's like a dream come true to have the ability to count with organizations like the Center for American Progress, who just yesterday released a poll on the Puerto Rican community in Florida. Thought it'd be an interesting thing to show some of the things that came out of this poll. First of all, 84% of all the Puerto Ricans that were sampled in this poll said that they were intending to vote. Wow, 84%. That's a huge number. And if people think that Trump and these, the condescending way the Republican Party has dealt with Mexicans and Latinos in general, well, we're feeling it too. And we the other night, Trump talks about racial profiling. Well, we know about racial profiling, and I think we're seeing a community that's really becoming excited about voting this year and basically dándole un tapón, like we say in Spanish, blocking that shot. That was one of the interests. Huh? Tapón, ¿verdad? So anyway, the other thing, for us that have been working in the community for a long time, it's no surprise that the economy and progressive policies matter. 85% of the sample support a candidate who wants to invest in emergency funding for Zika. Spending on pre-K programs in public schools, 84%. Setting clean standards and increasing clean energy and green jobs, 80%. Creating a path for citizenship, solidarity with our immigrant brothers, 77%. Expanding Medicaid to increase coverage for low-income people, 76%. When it comes to the partisan, where we are with the candidates, 74% of Puerto Ricans polled in this study are with Hillary. Only 17% are with Trump.
Now that's not surprising because the national polls are even trending more Latino for Hillary Clinton. Some are even arguing it could approach 80%, beat Clinton's record in 2000. But my question to Charlie is, who are these 17% of the Puerto Rican community in Florida, Charlie, that are supporting Donald Trump? Can you give me some insight who these people are? I mean, what's the mentality of a Puerto Rican in Florida that's supporting Donald Trump?
Honestly, with the 17%, and I'm not in Florida, but I've done a lot of work there as well. I'll just safely would assume that that's probably people that are either very religious, probably very conservative on social values. So I could see those folks, still supporting Trump. Because we do have a lot of religious people that are coming from the island.
Is the Fox News effect. I mean, remember back in the days when Bush had a good relationship with Univision, that they, that there was some inroads with that constant propaganda. And, because of the entertainment factor, Marcos, to your point earlier, I think some people, even some Latinos that are generally not necessarily conservative, sort of started watching it, and, it just gets beat over their heads. And I would also think, Marcos, I don't know if you agree with this. Is there any any transferring of ideology? So if your statehood are more conservative on the island, and I think a lot of that goes to those social issues that maybe by default you're supporting Trump. I don't know, Marcos. What are you seeing down there? I mean, obviously most Latino, Puerto Ricans are with Hillary, but
Yeah, I think part of what Charlie is saying is true. There is a conservative on social issues vote. There's also people that are from the 1% and higher who aspire to be like Trump. There's also Puerto Ricans that are racist. I mean, let's be frank and sincere about that. Who may not be offended by the comments and may actually agree with some of the comments that he makes. So I mean, I don't want to say that we're all the same, and that obviously we have some bad elements, I would consider them bad in our midst. But when you look at, for example, the support for Rubio in the same poll, it goes it goes to 41%. And Patrick Murphy, his opponent, only has 44%.
Really interesting. Where do you attest to that,
community.
Marcos? That's, for him to split isn't bad, for him.
Well, I mean, yeah, no, that's particularly on the votes he's had on, his opposition to Sonia Sotomayor, his position on his flip flopping on supporting, the fiscal control board and allowing Puerto Rico to have bankruptcy. There's been a lot of, he's had to deal with Puerto Rican issues, and he's voted bad on those issues every time. So here we go back to I want to say in the same exact way, but going back to the conversation we were having about the Mexican thing, it's where mainstream society is where white Democratic candidates or white progressive candidates, they don't campaign in the I-4 corridor. They don't think they don't think it's important to reach out to and speak to Puerto Ricans as a unique voting bloc. A big mistake in Florida to consider that, particularly given the numbers that we reached.
No, the other thing that was really interesting is that the issue of Puerto Rico is on the minds of Puerto Rican voters, whether they're from the island or New Yorkers or longtime Florida residents. So it says here in the poll, 82% reported that they would be more of Puerto Rican voters in Florida on this poll. It said they would be more likely to vote for a candidate who supported economic aid to the island and in general, was actively addressing the crisis.
Look, this issue is, I would equate it to the immigration issue in a way. It's a background issue. It's one of those issues that says, you're talking to me, you care about me, right? Because most people, all Latinos that vote are no longer immigrant. They become citizens. They maybe they're second generation, third generation. So they're not on a green card. They're not undocumented. They are full-fledged citizens that can vote. So it doesn't affect them, yet immigration issue is an important issue to them. Now, is immigration the top issue for most Latinos? No, it isn't. It comes third, fourth. It's up there. It's a background issue. It's an issue that identifies us as a voting bloc. The same way that what's going on in Puerto Rico and the suffering that people feel by being, by by coming to the realization that for years we've thought that we have self-government, that we've thought that we have a democracy that represents us, and both through the two decisions in the Supreme Court and the imposition of the fiscal board, there's just no denying and no arguing anything other than Puerto Rico is simply a colony, and the sovereignty of Puerto Rico lies squarely and only in the Congress of the United States. So we're plain and simple a colony. So things that go on in Puerto Rico, the corruption of the politicians, the frustration, all of those things are in the minds of Puerto Ricans all the time. And not just, the poll indicates, not just in those that just arrived recently. It's in second generation Puerto Ricans, third generation Puerto Ricans. The identity of the Puerto Ricans is very, very strong.
I think the other thing, this whole election cycle, quite frankly, they haven't paid much attention to addressing the debt crisis in Puerto Rico. And honestly, the only candidate who even wrote something in writing a white paper was Bernie Sanders. Like right now, recently, I know there was an article about Trump and his ties to Cuba and Hillary. Right away, they put out an ad. They've been running ads, I heard. But you have hedge funds destroying our country, and you don't see Hillary or anybody else with that same urgency to address that. So I think we also as Puerto Ricans have to hold them accountable. And I think we don't do that as well. So, because in Miami, I lived there for many years. If you by any chance do something that goes contrary to the Cuban Americans, they will let you know at the polls and everywhere else. That's something that you have to admire from them.
That's right. No, and we have to not only have accountable for the treatment of the island, but also the treatment of the Puerto Rican community in Florida. And I know, Marcos, and other conversations, we'll have other episodes where we really can dive deeper into the Puerto Rican transplant condition, because the state needs more resources to help integrate the Puerto Rican Latino community into the state. And you hear stories of people that are homeless and all kind of lack of social services to address this community. We have friends and organizations and partners that are doing the best with the resource they have to address it. But these U.S. citizens that can be many of which are educated, can be a very valuable asset to the Florida economy, and they need more support as well. And again, you're listening to Ray's Talk Show. Just three Puerto Rican guys talking politics today: Marcos, Charlie, and myself, your host Ray Collazo. These guys know their stuff. My last question to you guys on this piece is that there's a good chance Puerto Ricans can become the largest voting Latino electorate in Florida. We could vote in comparable numbers, if not more, than higher numbers than the Cuban American community. I mean, Marcos, with a strong turnout of Puerto Ricans, I mean, this could really fundamentally change the Latino electorate in Florida, the Latino political power. I mean, this is a great opportunity for our community. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and I think we have a lot of people seeing that. There's a lot of interest in every newspaper. There's stories about the Puerto Rican community in Central Florida, and in the rest of the state. I want to go back, Ray, if I may, to one last statistics from that poll, which is my favorite one, and I left it for the end. and that is they asked the question: how many of the people in the survey had been contacted by a campaign or an organization that's trying to mobilize people to vote? You know what the number was? 37%. And then we asked the Center for American Progress, what was that comparable to other Hispanics in Florida and other polls that have been done in the reasonable time frame and this poll was conducted by Latino Decisions, by the way, for the Center for American Progress. And the number for other Latinos who were the smaller number of voters in the I-4 quarter was 47%. 47%. And so, we had a very interesting phenomenon happen in the primaries in the main congressional district. There's Congressional District 9, where you had Darren Soto, a Puerto Rican a candidate of Puerto Rican descent, from New Jersey, but living now and being He was former senator, former state house, former state senator, state member of the state house, and he was running against Dana Grayson, who is the wife of the former congressman in the district, very well-funded candidate, and Susana Randolph, another progressive leader in Orlando, and our first look at the turnout in the primary, we had around 33 or 35% turnout in a primary. The recent primaries have only had 11% turnout in Osceola County, where this was being measured. So it's very interesting. I think that in what I call Mount Olympus of politics, where big decision makers are making policies on statistics and on numbers, the Puerto Rican community is seen as, wow, this very valuable piece of progressive real estate. And the problem is that we're not being given the respect, and we're not being at the table. And so the victory of Darren Sono is significant because it's an election. It's about respect. It's about saying, we are here. This district was drawn with the intention of electing a Latino to that seat, and probably a Puerto Rican, given the numbers of Puerto Ricans in that district. And you know what? We did it. We elected Darren Soto in the primary. So I think our time's arrived.
Absolutely, and let's not forget, everyone, kind of this Cuban versus Puerto Rican dynamic exists in the blogosphere and in the media around, sort of the story of the Puerto Ricans are coming kind of thing, and challenging the Cuban American electorate to be the largest electorate. But about a third of the Latino electorate in the state is neither Puerto Rican or Cuban, and all the other groups. There's a lot of groups, obviously, in that number, but as we know, as you and me and Charlie know, Marcos, the Dominican community organizes down there fairly aggressively. The Colombian community. So the beauty of the diversity is really coming through, and hopefully this emergent Puerto Rican electorate will highlight all of that. So, and again, you're listening to Marcos Villar and Charlie Ramos on Ray's Talk Show. Let's get to the bochinche segment. Yeah. So Charlie, I'm gonna do the first one, and then see if you've got something for me. Marcos, tan buena gente, he don't like to gossip, so I'll leave Marcos alone with it. But so the first bochinche, I don't know if you guys saw this, we have to bring it up, is that we had a few nights ago the only debate, official debate taking place between the two women running for U.S. Senate for the open U.S. Senate seat in California, Kamala Harris, the current Attorney General of the state, and the favorite to win the race, and she would be the one of the very few women of color, and I believe the first Asian American woman in the U.S. Senate, being, of course, half Indian descent, and the darling of sort of, Democratic politics and progressive politics, strong ally of President Obama. And the person that finished second in the primary, a longtime Congresswoman from Orange County, California, Loretta Sanchez, that has a combination of a very distinguished record of service with sort of being sort of a wild card persona. And that came out in the debate. I don't know if you guys saw, but Charlie, did you know what she did at the end of the debate, Loretta Sanchez?
She did the dabbing.
She did the dabbing. So, Lovita, Charlie, did you see the look on Kamala Harris's face when she did the dab?
Yeah, she just was like, okay, clearly this.
Now, it didn't get on the screen, but somebody took a picture of it. The funny thing is, she actually looked pretty smooth, which is kind of cool. Charlie, I know you. It's a big country, but Kamala is obviously the favorite. The Latino intelligentsia is sort of placing their bets on the favorite. I mean, La Opinión endorsed Kamala Harris. The United Farm Workers endorsed Kamala Harris. I mean, just a lot of the big, well-known, Latino leaders in California.
Even Dolores Huerta.
Kamala. Dolores Huerta, yes, she's endorsing Kamala Harris. So, Charlie, what do you think of this dabbing? I think that was seemed a little out of place, bro. A little out of place.
I think that was her Howard Dean moment. And I think all candidates, not all, but most candidates have those moments. Yeah, that was,
Well,
honestly, kind of what
well, you
Marcos
know
said
what?
earlier.
You know what? And I gotta jump in here, but Donald Trump has one every day. What are we talking about? I think we live in the age of of Howard Dean moments.
Well, it's funny because one of our Latina leaders out there, who Brenda from the Tamarindo podcast, we work really closely with. She's a Loretta, despite Loretta's outtakes and wacky behavior at times. She's a supporter of hers. She said, "Look, she may not be she may not be leading in the polls or as polished at times as Kamala Harris, but in Ocean County, Orange County, California, she's been providing a lot of resources for that Latino community. She beat a very conservative anti-Latino candidate to win that seat 20 years ago, Bob Dornan, for people that remember that race. So she gets it done. And she likes the fact that she has a quirky personality. So, not everyone has to be buttoned up. So, we're going to do my guests next week are going to be California activists like Charlie and Marcos out in the West Coast. And we're going to dive a little bit more in that Senate race. But I had to bring up that bochinche. Charlie, you're the a lot of people don't know that, but you're the founder of this segment. You're the one that inspired this segment with your Gay Bochinche hashtag on Facebook. So
take this last chance to sort of comment on what you said about the Cuban and the Puerto Ricans. I think when I talk about the Puerto Rican vote, and when I work to grow the Puerto Rican vote and grow our position and our place and our respect within the state and within the country, I talk about it in the sense, we're doing this for the Puerto Ricans and our neighbors, because we don't live isolated from other people. We live next to African Americans, we live next to other Latinos, we live next to white progressives and Republicans too. And so, we're doing what we're doing for our children and for our neighbors. And so that's sort of what I wanted to end on, and let you know that in Miami, we may have the opportunity of electing a Puerto Rican to the State House of Representatives in a district that's Cuban. And you know what? If that happens, that would be a beautiful thing, because I think that one of the problems that the Cuban, particularly the younger Cuban, that's more open-minded, is looking for a real answer, and not this rigid craziness that we're seeing out of the Republican Party. They don't really have a place to go to, because the machine is conservative. The machine down there is Republican, and if you don't play in that and you don't talk the talk, you just don't prosper. Like others. And in some cities like Chicago, you could say the opposite, or New York, where if you're not a Democrat, you just you don't prosper. So I think that the growth of the Puerto Rican community is really allowing Cubans who do feel a sense of more progressive politics to come into that space, and that's a really good thing, and I welcome it, and I myself love to work with the Cuban community in building conditions for the respect of all Latinos and of our peoples.
And people, I'm so glad you brought that up, because there's such a history of it that we don't get acknowledged as much, right? So I think about the political history of Senator Bob Menendez, who, basically, once he ran on the federal level, needed the support of Puerto Rican voters to win that initial congressional seat and subsequently his Senate seat. There's certainly a much larger population of Puerto Ricans in New Jersey than Cubans, even in the old days. And then people also should know a little trivia for those political geek junkies out there. Understand this Latino. There's a lot of history with our communities. In the 80s,
That's right.
The mayor of Miami was Puerto Rican, Maris Ferrer, who, the family has some Cuban ancestry, but still a very proud Puerto Rican, a very prominent Puerto Rican family. So there's a lot of history of us supporting each other. And look, I mean, you can't get two communities any closer, and there's a lot of love here. So this is a positive conversation. I'm glad you brought it to where it needs to be, Marcos. Thank you so much. And we could go on a list. We could spend all night talking about the famous Puerto Rican Cubans, including Charlie's homie Fat Joe from the Boogie Down, and many other celebrities and icons who are both Puerto Rican and Cuban. As we wrap up the show, I like to do a shout-out segment to go on Marcos's theme of positivity, because there's a lot of positive things going on. So I'll do the first one, and if you guys give you a second to think about any shout-outs, whether it's community leaders or just good things happening that we want to acknowledge. But going on that Mexican theme from the debate the other day, that hashtag really has fomented some beautiful interactions, a beautiful commentary from particularly our Mexican brothers and sisters who are using that hashtag to talk about what that Mexican thing really means to this country, how they're contributing, how their families are contributing to our country. And in particular, if you go to racepodcast.com, I will have a link in the show notes to an article that Julissa Arce wrote over the last few days about what that Mexican thing means to her. And this is a woman that went from being an undocumented child in San Antonio, Texas, to being a vice president at Goldman Sachs. So she is a young financial guru doing big things on Wall Street, and her personal history is incredible. I want to have her on the show to talk more about that, but I wanted to give all of our Mexican friends and Mexican American friends that are taking this terrible comment by Mike Pence to and educating people about what really that Mexican thing is all about. So shout out to our Mexican brothers and sisters and that Mexican thing hashtag. Charlie, any shout outs you wanted to share with our Race Talk Show listeners as we wrap up?
I think I want to give a shout out to the Native Americans who are protesting that new oil pipeline in North Dakota.
Amen, brother.
I know a lot of the constituency groups have taken a opposing position from the AFL-CIO, but I'm glad that my union was one of the first unions to come out supporting the Native Americans there. Also, I want to give a shout out to the 600 plus New Yorkers who are coming to Washington, D.C. this Sunday to stand and support Oscar Lopez Rivera. So I will be here waiting for them. So I'm excited about that. And I also want to give a shout out to my fellow brother Marcos doing that good work in Orlando.
Man, Charlie, you need to. I mean, you also have inspired the shout out segment. You really, that was awesome. That all good stuff. Kudos. And once we get past this election, Marcos and Charlie, we really need to have some. Entre lo Boricua, we need to do some conversations about let people know who Oscar Rivera Lopez is, because that will be a window of time in the lame duck, and as Obama's wrapping up, that we can get that man freed potentially through a pardon. And so that conversation right after Election Day is going to really heat up for all of us. So kudos to our friends that'll be in D.C. on Sunday. Marcos, any final shout outs, brother, from
first
from
of all,
the,
I want
from
to
the
thank
Sunshine
Charlie
State
for his shout out, and also ditto the ones that you and he shouted out prior to me. But I'm not in Florida alone, so I want to mention a few of the warriors that are down there making the fight for respect of the Puerto Rican community down there and the Puerto Rican vote. I want to start with Nancy Rosado of Misión Boricua. Wow, what a champion, what a woman, what a mentor, what a abuela, and teacher. I want to also mention Julissa Arce. We have a Julissa Arce in Orlando. She's the director of the Office of Organized Now. I want to give a shout out to Jimmy Torres. I want to give a shout out to Natasha Otero Santiago. And there's a bunch others. I mean, countless of folks that are working day in, day out to really inspire the Puerto Rican vote and the Latino vote in Central Florida. So to all of them, un abrazo y pa'lante.
Absolutely, and not a surprise that it's a lot of names of some very strong, positive Puerto Rican Latina women in that list. And I will also attach.
Oh my God, I would die if I had to. Yeah,
olvida. Va a dar una chancleta, tirar una chancleta. You don't mention those women. I mean, those are some dynamos.
You gotta create the chancleta section too next.
I know.
No, the fight. The fight for respect in Orlando and in Florida is being carried on the shoulders of our women of all generations. Las mayores, las maestras, las madres, las abuelas, and the new generation, the Cristina Hernandezes, the Julissas, a lot of good men too, pero esas mujeres en Orlando son una guerrera, and my kudos to all of them.
Oh yeah.
¿Y dónde están los perfumados en Orlando?
In the 17%.
Yo, that's funny. Well, guys, before we let you go, let people know where they can find you on social media, because I know there's going to be a lot of buzz and interest in this conversation and continuing these conversations about what's going on. So let people know where they can find you on social media. Marcos, where can people find you online?
Marcos Villar on Facebook, basically.
Oh, tremendo, tremendo. Muchas gracias, hermano. And again, I hope all is well in Florida. Charlie, where can people find you?
Charlie from the Bronx. Yo estoy en Carlos Charlie Ramos on Facebook.
Yeah, a great Facebook follow. We need you more on Twitter, Charlie. But you are a tremendous, one of my, not only just a great friend anyway, but one of my favorite Facebook friends because he was a little timid here with the bochinches, but he's always throwing them out on Facebook. So you can wrap that up. And again, if people like to, obviously you can, anywhere you can find Ray's Podcast, rayspodcast.com, Ray's Podcast and Ray's Talk Show. And anywhere you can download a podcast, iTunes. Guys, we're on Spotify now, which is giving us a lot of exposure. And basically anywhere you can find Ray's Podcast on social media, Twitter, Facebook, you can find us. Muchas gracias, hermanos. And I know we're going to be very busy for the next 3 or 4 weeks with this election, but I hope to celebrate with you guys very soon in person, okay?
All right.
Hablamos. This is your host, Ray Collazo of Ray's Talk Show. I know my Colombian friends and my friends that follow closely Latin American politics are like, these Puerto Rican guys talked about politics for 50 minutes and didn't mention Colombia. So I wanted to make sure that we gave a moment to let people know, of course, discuss the recent peace accord, which was then subsequently days later turned down by a referendum by the people of Colombia. There's been for decades a terrible civil war taking place within the country led by the FARC, which achieved a tentative peace deal with President Juan Manuel Santos and the government of Colombia, which basically would have ended this decades-long conflict, which was subsequently overturned and voted down by the people of Colombia. The pundits expected that this would easily pass, right? I mean, we would all, by rights, you would think people would want to vote for peace and be able to move forward. But as the voters that came out in force and were very passionate, from the social media I saw the sort of more passionate side, the no side, who may or may not have been more directly affected by the violence over the many decades in their local communities or even their personal families, pointed out that the agreement, in their opinion, many people's opinion have voted no, basically gave the FARC a free pass. Part of the agreement basically absolved the FARC and its leadership of any sort of potential criminal proceedings and allowed and encouraged, essentially, gave the FARC, which was going to create a new political party, a certain amount of power within the government. So there's lots of speculation as to what really happened here. Polls had suggested that easily the Colombian voters would vote for yes and be able to move forward on this peace accord. There's speculation that part of the reason is that there was very low voter turnout. The voter registration electoral system is. We have challenges here. Imagine in a country like Colombia, potentially. So there was low turnout. There was the perception that yes was sort of the sexy choice by people in cities and people of the middle and upper classes that weren't directly impacted by the FARC's particular hold on certain more rural counties and communities in the country. And so there's lots of speculation as the why, but the bottom line is that the people have spoken in a democratic vote. No to the accord barely passed, and that we hope as the Colombian president and his leadership go back to the bargaining table with the FARC's team in Cuba, where they're actually having these discussions, that we hope we can continue to foment peace not only in Colombia but throughout Latin America. So a very important moment for the Colombian community. There's lots of passion, particularly with the Colombian diaspora in the United States, some of which has immigrated to the United States directly because of this conflict on some level. And so there's lots of passion, lots of opinions. So we really appreciate the care and the thoughtfulness of our Colombian friends that have, on both sides of this discussion, that have engaged in this conversation, and we continue to want to support them and their communities moving forward in a their democratic process in the beautiful country of Colombia. Thanks for listening to Ray's Talk Show. For more insights from your virtual Big Brother, Ray Collazo, and the Big Brother Ray community, subscribe to Ray's Talk Show at BigBrotherRay.com or on iTunes. To my rays of light, keep shining.